I'm Dr. Lisa College. Welcome to Cultured by Neurodesign. How do you feel when you know that you need to speak up in a group? Do you feel excited, energized? Is your mind buzzing with ideas? Are you ready to jump in? Or does your stomach do strange things? Does your pulse race? Does your mind scramble to find the right words? Well, this different kind of behavior is something that often comes up when working with groups of people who have got different neurostyles. And thinking about it always takes me back to my discussion with Richard Etienne in episode 20 of this podcast, when he described the difference beautifully between extroverts and introverts. Extroverts gain energy by thinking, by speaking, by interacting with others. When we participate in a brainstorm, the brainstorm is usually structured as a high energy ideation session, like share your ideas now. Perhaps we'll comment on them. It's pretty much all done verbally, and then thanks very much, we're done. So for an extrovert, a typical brainstorm like this can feel like the battery just got recharged. Introverts, on the other hand, recharge by reflecting quietly, alone. Speaking up costs energy, and they prefer to process, to think, and then to contribute, which is probably not the way that the last brainstorm that you joined was set up. Now, this is not about whether introverts have the ability to contribute to a brainstorm or not. It's not about whether someone has something valuable to add or not. An introvert can contribute something valuable to a group, to a brainstorm, just as much as an extrovert can. This is only about preference. It's only about where we get our energy from and where we have to expend energy when we're brainstorming. And this isn't only about introversion and extroversion either. I just find that perspective a very convenient way to discuss this. It's about all of our different neurostyles, which I could also describe in light of autistic traits or ADHD traits or neurotypical traits. It's about the natural way that all of our brains prefer to work, however we describe those ways. It's about how we expend the least energy participating in a brainstorm so that we have the most energy and the most focus left over to engage with the information, whether that's taking in information, processing information, or communicating information, so that we give our best to the outcome, to the group outcome. So let me offer myself as an example. Now, unless people know me very well, they usually assume I'm extrovert. I'm a good networker. I can walk into a room full of strangers and I can have meaningful conversations, and I will leave that room with facts and insights that I didn't know before. I've had feedback that I'm a confident and a good and engaging presenter. I'm skilled at connecting people in mixed groups, and I can build a trusting environment very quickly. So yes, people often assume that I'm extrovert, but I'm not. These are skills that I've learned over my career. I didn't feel pressured to learn them. Nobody made me. I didn't feel I had to learn them against my will. I chose to learn them because I needed them to achieve the outcomes that I wanted to achieve in my career. So I took training and made myself practice, and gradually I've got better at these things, and I've got so much better at them that people tend to think that they come naturally to me. And they don't loom as big in my day as they used to, but they're not the first things I choose to do with my working day. And when I know that I have to do these kind of activities in my day, I pay attention that I don't, if I can plan it this way, I don't have anything demanding before or after, and I pay attention to prepare and to research for those sessions. So my preference to work in an introvert way also continues in the way that I then get most from the insights that I gather from, for example, all this connecting with people, right? And that way is not by talking in the first instance, it's by quiet consideration. I prefer to have space to reflect. And then sometimes people say to me like, oh, you want to do everything on your own? No, it's also not about never sharing my ideas with others, to never get their contributions. I just prefer to have considered my ideas for a while before I share them. If I have the choice, that's what I'll do. And then, having reflected quietly on my own, I'll refine my ideas by sharing them and by enriching them with other people's perspectives. And if I'm forced to do that immediately after the networking, after the conversations, if I'm forced to do that without downtime, without time to think, then I'm not at my best. I'm still pretty good. You'll still get value from me, but I'm not at my best. And I know many others feel the same. Now, I've described this in terms of introversion and contrasting it with extroversion, but I could, as I mentioned, equally well use this description of someone who is autistic. Autistic people tend to prefer to digest data, take a look at analytics, to consider and to give a complete and thorough input. It's not the kind of approach that we tend to structure a brainstorm to welcome. We usually think of extrovert output. We consider a brainstorm has been successful if a few people have participated very enthusiastically. Now, in order to contrast this style with autism, I'm going to call this more typical kind of brainstorm style the ADHD style of contributing. Ideas come easily, high energy, and there's a tendency to be more in the moment. Now, let me go back to introversion, extroversion, and share a statistic that surprised me when I first saw it. 56.8% of people globally have a preference for introversion. 56.8%. More than half. More than half of the people in those brainstorms are working outside of their preference when they have to speak up. And more than half people won't be at their best. So why do we keep brainstorming in this way? Well, the reason is that our brainstorms are well geared up to the extrovert minority because our leadership doesn't reflect that 56.8% of introversion. Leadership is still weighted towards extroverts, likely because of unconscious bias. People promote people who remind them of themselves, and people assume that a successful leader has to be an extrovert because that's what they're used to. So the result of this is another statistic which I also think is surprising and sad. 9 out of 10 people say they feel pressured to behave in an extroverted way at work. And so this cycle keeps going, right? If you're running a brainstorm, you'll likely design it in a way that feels most natural to you. We've seen that most leaders are energized by fast-paced discussion, and they'll mirror their own preference, and they'll rarely hear that another way of working might be better for more people, because most people, 9 out of 10 people, feel pressure to play along, to act as though they're introverted and as though they love thinking out loud and as though they love sharing their ideas quick fire. So we keep having brainstorms designed for the minority, and we are missing out on the insights of people who don't happen to naturally think in that extrovert, ADHD type, thinking out loud style. So we're missing out. Now, brainstorming is difficult, right? If the answer to your problem was easy, you wouldn't need the brainstorm session in the first place. So you need the people participating to be at the top of their game. And when people are using a lot of energy coping with the process, because it's a long way from their natural thinking process, a natural way with which they engage with information, then they have far less energy left for what you want to focus on, which is the ideas themselves. All right, hopefully I have made my point clearly. So what can we do about this? What can you as a team lead do to help someone with a different neurostyle? Introvert, autistic, however you want to describe it. What can they do to help someone like me focus optimally on helping to solve the problem that you want to solve? What can you do to help me to share my contribution in a way that plays to my strengths? Well, what we can do is to apply best practices from neurodivergence inclusion to the way that we structure brainstorming sessions. Now, we don't need to wait for someone to say, I'm autistic, please change your brainstorm design for me. We know with a high degree of certainty that there are people who are not natural brainstormers in your group of participants. So we can assume that this diversity of neurostyles is present in your team and in every team. And we can design your brainstorm with that in mind. We can create a process where everyone, whether they think out loud, whether they reflect quietly first, whether they process information in a way that might not be obvious to you, but we can design your brainstorm in a way in which everyone has a meaningful way to contribute. Here are 3 focus areas, each with 3 tips to help you get started with getting the very best from your brainstorm. So first of all, let's start by thinking in advance of the brainstorm itself. Just enable participants who want to prepare in advance. You need to prepare anyway, so just prepare in a way that can be shared so that those who want to can build their familiarity with the material, can think about their ideas before the actual session itself. So here are 3 tips within this focus area to help you before your brainstorm. First of all, help to make the brainstorm safe by sharing your game rules for behavior, such as being creative and supportive of ideas and not evaluating suggestions as better or worse or feasible or not feasible at this stage. Second, provide the evidence that you will use to underpin the discussion. Don't just spring it on people in the session. Now remember that some people prefer to look at original evidence and some will prefer to look at derived visualizations or summaries. So ideally you'll provide both, perhaps the raw data plus a chart and anonymized original survey comments with a summary. And third, show an agenda. Explain the method that you're going to be following to let participants share their ideas to the collaboration board. Remove as much of the unknown as possible. If you're going to share an online collaboration tool to let people share their inputs, then share a link to the tool that you'll be using so that people can take a look if they want to, and just make sure that they're familiar with the functionality in advance of your session. All right, the second focus area is the brainstorm session itself. And here the focus that I'm going to talk about is to provide more than one option to share ideas during your brainstorm session. First tip is to start with silent brainstorming. So before anyone speaks, besides you when you're setting up the meeting, before anyone speaks, give people 5 minutes to just quietly write down their ideas. And what this will do is to let reflective thinkers get their thoughts in order before the energy of the group takes over. Second, consider having multiple rounds of contributions. And that will allow you to invite written as well as spoken contributions. So for example, in round 1, you might invite everyone in turn to share an idea, to share it verbally. It's an invitation, so it's not obligatory, but you're going to capture it on your collaboration board. And then you will provide some time to let people share further ideas to the board in writing. That will be in the second round. And in the third round, you could ask people to vote on the ideas that they'd like to work further on, to elaborate on. You could invite questions, and then you could write down related ideas. These all provide different ways of looking at the information and different opportunities to contribute in a way which is more natural to people. And a third tip is to give quieter team members a starting point to build on by resetting the discussion so that everyone approaches it from a new angle. So you could, for example, ask a question like, what would this look like if we simplified it by half? Or how would our competitors solve this? So you keep working on the same problem, but from a different approach, and everybody, in a way, starts from the beginning again. The last focus area is to provide an extended opportunity to contribute. Right? Not every idea has to be shared in the moment, and some team members, as we talked about, are going to be doing their best thinking once they've had time to reflect, to revisit the problem, to build on the group's initial ideas in their own space. If you consider a brainstorm as a process, then you can create some additional inclusive opportunities after the brainstorm itself. The second tip is to set up a shared document or a chat thread or something like that, where people can add thoughts later if they want, once they've had time to reflect. And the third tip is to just make sure you give participants a defined but stated amount of time to feedback so that there is an end point. 1 or 2 days will be fine, I think, although you could make it longer if you want. But just after those 1 or 2 days or longer, communicate what you're going to do with the ideas now, and if and when there will be opportunities to get involved further so that people can stay involved with the ideas that they've invested in. And these aren't just helpful tweaks. They are steps to unlock the collective brilliance that is waiting in your team. So if you're finding that you're not getting good ideas out of your team, it's probably not because the ideas aren't there. It's because they're being blocked from being shared somehow. So I'm not attempting in this podcast to cover an unsafe environment as a blocker, but it could be a reason why ideas aren't coming out. I'm focusing here on the brainstorm process itself. The research clearly shows that the most effective problem-solving teams are the ones with diverse neurotypes who are also able to connect and integrate those diverse contributions. It's not a feel-good inclusion story that I'm telling you. It's performance optimization rooted in research as to how humans have evolved as a group to all have different specializations in how they think and how they interact with information, so that they can contribute in their different ways to solving complex problems all together. And if your brainstorming process only works one kind of thinking, you're only going to get one kind of idea. But if you design for the diversity of neurostyles, which we have in all of our groups, you're going to create the space for deeper insight and more creativity and ultimately better decisions and higher value. For some people, contributing in a brainstorm feels like oxygen or drinking a can of Red Bull, or like they've just drunk a strong cup of coffee. But for others, remember, it feels like an obstacle course, whether you see that or not, whether they tell you about that or not. And if we want the best from everyone, which you do, if you want the best ideas that your team has to offer, then we have to enable everyone to work at their best. And as leaders, that means it's our job to design for differences, perhaps in invisible differences, but to design for differences, not to assume sameness. Now, if this resonated with you, if you're wondering how you can make your team's brainstorms and other processes more productive, then please book a free consultation and let's talk about it. We'll talk about what you're experiencing, we'll diagnose root causes, and we'll see how building a neuro-inclusive team will benefit the performance of your team. You'll find the link in the episode notes, or visit my webpage, go to the Let's Connect page, and you'll find the link there as well. And if this episode helps you to reflect and gave you something to think about, then please share it. Every conversation helps to build a neuro-inclusive world where everyone can contribute their best. Thanks for listening.